It's my honor to deliver the inaugural address for the Office of Diversity and Inclusion and get this opportunity to interact with students and professors of IIT Delhi. I have a special reason to be here as well. I grew up in Delhi. I did part of my schooling in Delhi, and of course, I went to college. I went to St. Stephen's, where I studied economics and mathematics, and then I continued to do my law at Campus Law Center. And traveling by the ubiquitous DTC routes, I would pass by IIT when the conductor would normally proclaim that IIT Delhi has arrived. I always looked with a little bit of what could have been at these hallowed halls of IIT, which I never was able to enter, and looked at them with a certain degree of trepidation and awe. And it's with that sense of trepidation and awe with this Hall of Excellence that I've ventured to accept this invitation and speak to you and share some of my thoughts this evening. Today marks really a very special day for all of us as we get a chance to celebrate the 4th anniversary of the Supreme Court's decision in Navtej Singh Johar. While the decriminalization of Section 377 of the Penal Code has enabled queer people to emerge as legally empowered citizens and demand their rights rightfully and proudly, structural changes are still needed to ensure that we are able to extend these positive legal effects to marginalized queer people who continue to face intersecting oppressions. Intersectional discrimination is not something which is only confined to the queer, but certain groups of queer people, due to their caste and class positions, are more susceptible and vulnerable to the abuse of law, both in terms of symbolic and material harm. Discrimination is intersectional in the sense that our identities intersect. The experience of, say, a Dalit blind woman would be very different from the experiences of a Dalit male student, or for that matter, from the experiences who a student from the non-Dalit segment of society, who is or is not visually challenged, would bear in the day-to-day life. So it's these intersectional identities. All of us have different identities. We are an amalgam of a plurality of identities. I don't think any one of us has one singular identity which is definitive of the life which we live or of our experiences. But the much needed first legal step that the Supreme Court was able to take with the decriminalization of homosexuality in Navtej would not have been possible without the stories and the experiences of the petitioners and countless others whom they represented before us. One of the connected petitions was named Anvesh Pokuluri versus Union of India before the Supreme Court. And it comprised of a spirited chorus of 20 students and alumni from various IITs across the country, including IIT Delhi, representing Pravriti, a support group for LGBT members of the IIT fraternity. The youngest petitioner before the court was actually a young 19-year-old student of IIT Delhi. By taking a stand before the court in the Section 377 litigation, students and alumni of IITs helped in building a modern contemporary India, not just by advancing her technical skills, but by taking the country closer to her constitutional values. I must share with all of you that when I got the invite for this inaugural talk, I read and reread the quote which the Office of Diversity and Inclusion had added in their proposal. The line, which is taken from the Navte judgment, says, "Our Constitution, above all, is an essay in the acceptance of diversity. It is founded on a vision of an inclusive society which accommodates plural ways of life." I pondered over what it means for our educational institutions. In my understanding, what it signifies for all our universities and institutes of higher education is that they must look like the India which they represent. If IIT Delhi wants to continue to fulfill its vision of contributing to India's growth through excellence in scientific and technical education and research, of serving as a valuable resource for society, then a diverse, equitable, inclusive, and accessible IIT is needed. As we celebrate 60 years of IIT Delhi and we celebrate the establishment of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, this may be an appropriate moment to reflect on the transformative possibility of IITs by looking at the intersection of two long-standing concerns of the state: education and social justice. Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar's was a clarion call to educate, agitate, and organize. He repeatedly emphasized the importance of education for the emancipation of the oppressed sections of our society. However, in his address to the Constituent Assembly on 25th November 1949, Dr. Ambedkar also recognized that independent India was entering into a life of contradictions. The functioning of higher education in India, then as of now, represents this contradiction between hope and disappointment, between promoting social mobility and legitimizing existing inequalities in the name of credentials and degrees and merit. The idea of the IITs took shape in the late 1940s when the Sarkar Committee recommended the creation of higher technical educational institutions. In 1956, Jawaharlal Nehru, speaking at the first annual convocation of IIT Kharagpur, believed the IITs to be representing India's urges, India's future in the making. In 1961, the College of Engineering was established and later declared as an institute of national importance. It is now known as the Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, where we are all gathered. However, Nazir Ahmed, one of the members of the Sarkar Committee, had cautioned against the possibility of institutional isolation of the IITs and feared undemocratic limits to access. One of the criticisms that has been leveled against the IITs is that they have diverted state resources from primary education while remaining islands of excellence. Now, you may not necessarily agree with that criticism or critique. There have been sustained concerns of limited diversity in the IITs. Even as the base of the student body at the undergraduate level has become more diverse, though diverse not enough, questions have been raised time and again regarding the limited representation of gender diverse and marginalized communities in doctoral programs and faculty positions. When we think of the expression science, we tend to think about words like objectivity, merit, excellence, maybe even competitive examinations. But what do these words and phrases actually mean? For the next few minutes, what I want to do is unpack new meanings of old vocabularies with each of you. Excellence is normally understood in individual terms as a sign of individual merit, individual caliber, individual hard work. But by focusing on the individual, we often mark the historically acquired privilege that each of us shares. Over the years, families and communities have acquired different types of capital at different levels: economic capital, cultural capital, and social capital. The privileges that accrue to so-called general categories are not limited to English medium schooling, access to coaching centers, but it also includes cultural and social capital that is inherited from their families. In a seminal book which is titled The Caste of Merit, Engineering Education in India by Ajanta Subramaniam, the book relies on the work of sociologist Satish Deshpande to explain how policy terms like general category and reserved category or competitive examinations have mediated to transform caste capital into the modern capital of merit. Professor Deshpande points out the story of how upper castes transform their caste capital into modern capital, which is not very well known. By contrast, Deshpande continues, the political leveraging of caste by the lower castes is a recurrent and publicly debated theme. The result of this asymmetry, as he maintains, is that the upper castes are naturalized as the legitimate inheritors of modernity, while the lower castes are hypervisible as the illegitimate purveyors of caste. People belonging to different genders, regions, castes, and socioeconomic backgrounds bring in their own unique experiences, ideas, values, and perspectives to bear on the task at hand by asking new questions and seeking unique solutions. As Professor Amartya Sen said, we are diversely different because of the plurality of our identities, which intersect and cut across each other. Diversity is a virtue. It has an intrinsic worth in itself and furthers our understanding of fairness and social justice. It was the diverse student population of the IITs who, with their resilience and fortitude, decided to challenge Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code in our courts. Diversity also leads to positive outcomes in terms of making better scholars, better thinkers, and better citizens. Innovation in science occurs when someone has the courage to ask different questions, look at the problem from different perspectives, and gain new insights. Diversity results in innovative thinking and decision making, and richness in the originality of scholarly thought. Learning is impoverished when it happens in groups of like-minded people. And the grave danger which intellectuals across our globalized world today face is the danger of sitting in information silos, where we associate only with those who believe like us, who think like us, and who do not look beyond the horizons of that which is familiar. So diversity enables us to combine doctrine with experiential learning. Doctrine itself, as science will teach you, and as law has taught me, and as social sciences do teach us, doctrine is not really neutral. as our textbooks would like to teach us. Because doctrine embodies within itself ideology, preferences, and a worldview which sometimes protects the dominant or that which lies at the mainstream. Our experiential learning, and I dare say the experiential learning of all of us, whether we are faculty or judges or citizens, our experiential learning is affected by what we contact and combat in our day-to-day lives. So the ability of diversity lies in its potential to transform what we learn in terms of doctrine in these institutions of higher education, of technical excellence, as it transforms us as individuals through experiential learning with others. It was the diverse student population of the IITs, as I said, which combated the stereotypes which are built into Section 377 of the Penal Code. If I may take the liberty to give a personal example, over the years, I've had brilliant law clerks from diverse backgrounds, from different genders, a young Dalit student, castes, classes, regions, and cultural experiences, including students belonging to the LGBTQ community. My interactions with them continue to give me new perspectives, whether it is through the suggestion of a new movie or book, or by actively seeking new solutions to old problems. For example, one of my clerks from the batch of 2020-21 gave me an insight into the various issues of governance that people with disabilities face in their daily lives. In our own office, we ensured that the scanned case files we received were OCR readable. Steps were taken to change the visual capture on the Supreme Court of India website to an audio-visual capture, making it more accessible. When I dealt with a case of a young, blind Dalit girl who had been subjected to rape, and when the perpetrator was charged with a crime punishable under Section 376, I learned deeply from the experiential learning which one of my very dynamic young Dalit judicial clerks had brought to the table in our discussions over the year that he spent in engaging with me. I use these examples to show that difference and diversity need to be understood for their uniqueness, which is a resource rather than a liability. From my own judicial clerks who have been members of the LGBTQ community and their friends, I've understood what really happens in society across us. And that enables us to live more fuller, more richer lives as individuals as we transform the lives of others. In other words, we need to recalibrate how we understand our old vocabularies and realize that diversity and excellence actually complement and reinforce each other. To go back to one of my older judgments, the way we understand merit should not be limited to individual agency or ability, which in any event is not our sole or own doing, but it should be envisioned as a social good that advances equality, because that is the value which our Constitution espouses. It is important to note that equality here does not merely have a redistributive dimension, but also includes recognizing the worth and dignity of every individual. The content of merit cannot be devoid of what we value in our society. Excellence, like life itself, is enriched by diversity. When we talk of diversity, we need to bear in mind that it should exist at three levels. First, diversity must exist in terms of structural diversity, in terms of the composition of the people at the educational institution. Second, diversity in the classrooms and in the teaching resources of our higher institutions. And third, interactional diversity in terms of how inclusive the higher educational institute is to facilitate interactions across diverse groups. Just as technology must have within it the ability to converse with each other at diverse levels, so also we must have the ability to converse, accept, and respect each other and be accepting of the views of each other. On rare occasions, when students are able to cross the structural barriers and struggle against immense odds to enter institutes of higher education, their toughest battle begins inside the institutes of higher education. An institute which is only diverse, but which is not inclusive, imposes additional burdens on students due to their stigmatized identities. Instances of campus discrimination, microaggressions, social exclusion, feelings of a lack of connectedness, or support from peers and mentors can all have a pernicious impact on the dignity and mental health of students. Social justice cannot be restricted to access alone, but substantive inclusion is needed in higher educational institutes which promotes meaningful social and academic interactions with the larger campus community, including professors, administrators, staff, and peers. I would like to recount the story of Prince Jaibir Singh, a young Dalit student who traveled from Allahabad, now Prayagraj, to Kharagpur, to Mumbai, and ultimately to the Supreme Court in Delhi. Having been allocated a seat in civil engineering at IIT Mumbai, a technical error made Jaibir Singh miss his acceptance fee deadline. He moved the court to allow him to pay the acceptance fee and to facilitate his admission to IIT. Sitting with my colleague Justice A.S. Bopanna, we invoked the Supreme Court's extraordinary power under Article 142 of the Constitution and directed the state to ensure that the bright young student was admitted to IIT Bombay. Special steps in this particular case were necessary since, due to the digital divide and limited resources, technology became an impediment instead of being a great enabler. Jaibir didn't have money to pay the acceptance fee. He had borrowed some money from his sister, but the credit card didn't really give him support at the last minute. Similarly, intentional initiatives aimed at promoting integration in higher education are needed. When purposive initiatives like the Office of Diversity and Inclusion are undertaken, it translates into putting into work, setting goals, timelines, earmarking resources, and seeing what more needs to be done to make it work. The work undertaken by the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, whether it is by providing assistive technologies, holding gender sensitization workshops, initiating conversations through movies like Fundry, providing formal recognition and institutional support to a decade-old initiative like Indradhanu, or organizing remedial and education support programs. This work is the first step forward in the long journey towards the IIT's role in furthering social justice. There is much to be done in the project of realizing diversity, fully integrating diverse communities, different along a number of intersecting dimensions, including gender, class, caste, religion, and culture, both in the Indian society and in our higher educational institutions. As I take your leave, I leave you with the words of Paulo Freire, a Brazilian educator and philosopher who believed that pedagogy can function as an instrument for political resistance. And he said, and I quote, "The oppressor is solidary with the oppressed only when he stops regarding the oppressed as an abstract category and sees them as persons who have been unjustly dealt with, deprived of their voice, cheated in the sale of their labor, when he stops making pious, sentimental, and individualistic gestures and risks an act of love. True solidarity is found only in the plenitude of this act of love, in its existentiality, in its praxis. To affirm that men and women are persons, and as persons should be free, and yet do nothing tangible to make this affirmation a reality, is a farce," he says. Once again, I would like to congratulate the director of IIT Delhi and the dean of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and wish the students, the faculty, and the staff all the best. I cannot wait to see the strides that IIT Delhi will make towards making differences matter. Thank you very much for inviting me this evening.